and Ivy are going to be helping me with bringing people into the room and answering any questions that you have. So one of the things that I really like to encourage as part of any presentations that I give is questions, like all the time. So anytime you have a question, you don't have to wait till the end. Like I will try to allow some time at the end. We'll see how it works out. I will try to allow some time at the end to answer any questions people have, but if you have a question, just ask it in the chat or even come on mic and like straight up interrupt me. Just interrupt me, right? And I'll be happy to answer it. And if I feel like, you know what, we're going to get to this later, then just don't be offended. Like we're going to cover your question in something that'll come up on a later slide. So I'll probably be like, all right, hold on to that question because I think I might answer it in a little bit. So this is our program on demand on affirming and supporting LGBTQIA+ people. Before I go any further about what my office does and all of that, I want to just tell you a little bit about myself, not to be, super full of myself, but I think that it's important for you to know who I am. I use any and all pronouns. I am Dr. Erica Jane Friedman. You can just call me Erica though. I really don't like being called doctor. It's not really like how I see myself. So just call me Erica. It's totally cool. I welcome all pronouns because I don't label my gender. It's an experience for me. It's not an identity, and it's something that is fluid and shifts. And for me, pronouns, don't really lob onto me in the way they do for other people. So I don't mind any pronouns you want to use for me are good for me. And same with my sexuality, actually. My sexual identity is not an identity. It's actually just an experience. It's something also that is very fluid. So if you have any questions specifically about my gender experience or my sexuality, I'm happy to answer. I am an open book. That's part of what I'm here to do today. So please feel free to ask specifically about stuff like that related to me, but you'll probably have lots of other questions about other stuff I bring up today. So I'm a trained social psychologist. I'm originally from New York. I got to FIU a little over a year ago. I did my undergrad at Binghamton University. I got my bachelor's degree in psychology, and then I went on to get my social psychology PhD from the City University of New York Graduate Center. I studied gender and sexuality for over 10 years. I've spent over 5 years supporting diverse populations in higher ed work, and now I am here at FIU, and I am feeling super privileged every day to have this job because there are few and far between positions like this. Across the United States, there are very few LGBTQ specific offices or centers or positions to support students from this population. And so to have a position like this is a huge honor and privilege. And part of my role is to educate and make sure that all of you know how to support your fellow LGBTQ students, to learn about each other. Even students in our community don't always know everything about everybody in our community, so we all learn from each other. That's a part of my role, and a part of what our office does is this kind of education on how to support the diverse populations that exist at FIU. So we are a part of the Multicultural Programs and Services Office, and I want to give you like a little brief overview. So Multicultural Programs and Services has two kind of like major programs that you might want to also look into in the future. So we do these programs on demand. That's the image at the center here. There's lots of different programs that we offer on, microaggressions and power and oppression, and like lots of really great juicy topics. So we do offer those programs, and you can ask for like your student organization to have one of us from the MPAS office come and give those presentations as well. So this is just one of them that we offer out of the office. And then we also have a social justice badge program. If you're really committed to social justice work, supporting diverse populations, getting politically active and involved, that's a really great program to become a part of. And it can go like on your resume and on your LinkedIn profile, which is pretty cool. And then we have our office, which we are kind of like a sub office of Multicultural Programs and Services. And our website is lgbt.fiu.edu. We're also at FIU LGBTQA on like all the social media, so you can check us out there and all the other stuff that we do, because we don't just do education, we do a lot of other things. So some ground rules to get us started. You might feel a little bit of discomfort from some of the topics we go over today. What I ask is that you welcome it, right? This is a part of learning. When we feel discomfort, usually that means we're learning something new or something that maybe we haven't heard of before, maybe doesn't fit with what we've known to be true, but this is a different take, right? And so you welcome it, be open to it. Again, you can ask questions, and I really encourage you to ask questions. I know that with LGBTQ topics, it can be a little intimidating because I don't know what your experience has been with LGBTQ folks before, but I know that we're very, attention heavy on language that's used. And I know that some students can feel like, I don't want to ask it because I don't want to offend anybody and say the wrong word and right? And like, I want to make sure that you know that this space is where you can say the wrong words, because this is a learning space, right? This is a space where you better say it wrong here so that you can correct it, and then I can help you learn and you can leave here with the right words. So I would much rather you ask a question or say something in the wrong way than not say anything at all and not learn and leave here without that piece of education. So please ask whatever you want to ask and just be open to having that corrected and learning, how to move from there forward. So be open, ask questions. There is no judgments. Like, I'm not here to judge y'all. Everybody comes with a different amount of education around this stuff, a different amount of exposure to LGBTQ people and the language that we use. So just like respect other people in the room and where they are. Know that we're all learning. And just whatever you learn here, take that with you when you leave here. I make mistakes all the time too. I'm constantly learning, and I'm constantly, learning new language or understanding that, someone in my community uses a different word for something than I use. And that's completely normal and is a part of the process. And just know that, like, I'm not perfect either, right? Like, I do this, and I've been doing this education around this topic and researching this topic for over 10 years, and it's still a learning process. So just keep that in mind when you are, formulating your identity as an ally too. Like, it's not over today either, right? This is just like a beginning. You learn these pieces today, and you got to keep that learning going after you leave here. So some of the goals for today is to really build knowledge, and I would say like build awareness too around some of these topics. And then just to learn kind of basic how to apply some of that knowledge to your everyday interactions with people in the LGBTQ community. How do you support your fellow LGBTQ students that you're in the classroom with, or that you're interacting with in your groups and your clubs? And that's what it's all about. So we're gonna learn in particular how we all hold assumptions about other people's identities and experiences. And this spans not just sexuality and gender, right? It's like race, it's ethnic background, and where Pearson comes from. It's like all of that stuff. We make assumptions sometimes just by looking at people, and we do that. Everybody does, but it's about becoming aware of it and having knowledge about, well, what is it really for people? And how do you develop ways to kind of undo some of those assumptions, or to check those assumptions before you maybe offend somebody? So we're going to develop some practices that support the unique identities and experiences of everyone today. And we're going to start with some terminology, because, we just love our terminology in the LGBTQ community. You might have seen part or some of this acronym before. This is like, alphabet soup, right? It's like, oh my God, there's so many letters. So some of you are probably familiar with some of them you're probably not. And by the way, I really love interaction and presentations. I love activities and you all to, like, shout out things and whatever. If we were in a room and not over Zoom, I would be having you shout out for this next activity. So feel free to come off of mic, or you can just write in the chat. I'm gonna say the letter, and then you're gonna say the name that letter represents, or the word that letter represents. So everyone probably knows the first one. What does the L stand for?
Lesbian.
Yes. How about the G?
Gay.
Yeah, like, just shout gay. It's okay.
I don't want to be the only one.
Or type it. Yeah, or type it, right? Yes, lol. B, what does the B stand for?
Bisexual.
Bisexual. How about the T?
Trans
or transgender. Yeah. How about, there's two Qs. What's one of them? Queer. And how about the other one?
Questioning.
I'm watching it come up in the chat too, just so y'all know. So definitely keep typing in there. Very good. Okay, so now oftentimes we get to this part and people are like, not sure. What about the I? What does the I stand for?
Is
Intersex.
that
It is. It stands for intersex. And there's two A's in this one. One that's a little like controversial why it's in there or not. But what's one of the A's?
asexual?
Yeah, asexual. And then I see someone got the other one, which is ally. So that's one that like there's some, you know, question about whether or not they are a part of our community or like what are we talking about there. The P, what's the P stand for?
Pan?
Pansexual, that's correct. And how about NB?
Non-binary.
Non-binary. Whoop, whoop. All right, y'all are good. Look at all those comments in the chat. So what I'm going to do is reveal definitions for all of these. I'm not going to go over every single one of them because I'm hoping that some of you have a pretty good understanding of at least some of them, but some of them might be new to you. So I want to give you the chance to ask for me to read off the definition of any of them that you're a little confused about or you want to go over once. And then if you still have questions, we can dive in a little bit more. So which ones do you want me to kind of read the definition of and we can talk about it a little more? You can type it in the chat or you could come on mic and say which one.
Can you talk about ally?
I can, yeah. So that's great since I already kind of noted that there's a little controversy there. So yeah, an ally is a person who supports or advocates for any person or group of people in the LGBTQ+ community, seeks ongoing education, key, and is open to learning and teaching others to affirm and support LGBTQIA+ people. So why is ally controversial as part of this acronym? Because, you know, they don't necessarily identify within this spectrum, you know, of sexuality. This is basically saying they're probably straight, they're probably cisgender. You know, there's also some conversation about, you know, an ally could be a gay man, right? Who's an ally to a transgender person, for example. A gay man doesn't necessarily know everything that a trans person experiences or how to support a trans person. Not necessarily, right? Unless they've gotten that education. And then they're an ally and they're actively working to support their fellow trans people in the community. So an ally could be a member of the community. We could also say that a cisgender or straight person could be perceived as someone who identifies as lesbian, bisexual, gay, trans, if they are misperceived that way, right? So they could still be the target of the discrimination that LGBTQ+ people face just by being in association with the community. So there is some possibility there that allies can experience some of the same hate and discrimination just by way of being associated. Other questions about any of these acronyms here?
Yes, I have a question, Erica.
Mm-hmm.
Can you hear me?
Go ahead. Yes, I can. Go ahead, Travis.
Those are airplanes flying over me, so I'm in Homestead. So when are the letters going to increase? Because every time I'm saying new letters, the alphabet soup, and I'm an ally as a homosexual person that identifies same gender loving, but I can't keep up with all the letters all the time. How often do it change?
I hear you. I mean, I think that one of the great things about our community is that we are constantly trying to center people who we don't necessarily always hear about. We're trying to amplify the voices of people who have marginalized sexualities or marginalized genders, and we are diverse. And we add more and more letters to this ongoing, ever-changing acronym to be inclusive. You know, there are so many more than even just here. You know, there's two-spirit people. Sometimes people put 2S at the start of this. There's, you know, the list goes on and on. There's a ton of different identities for non-binary that fall under that umbrella. So instead of dwelling on like every single one in the book, I could do like a semester-long class just on the acronym. We give you just a little bit of it, some of the ones that we know our students identify with and that we want to delve into a little bit more in this presentation. But I would say, when does it keep going? It's ongoing. It's constantly emerging and evolving is what I would say. Any other particular terms that you would like to go over the definitions of, anybody, before I move on from this? We are going to dive deep into intersex, a little bit into trans and non-binary, so a little bit later. But if there's any other ones I can touch on. We're all pretty good. We're like, yep, we got it. All right, cool. You all are easy, but this is if you ever want this slide from me, you want to go over these definitions, I can give them to you. So These ones have to do with gender. All right, this is important. This is the separation between what are we talking about when we're talking about gender versus what are we talking about when we're talking about sexuality. So for gender, transgender folks, queer is sometimes used to refer to people who have like a queer gender, right? Like it's just a different gender is what they're talking about, or like not cisgender. You might have heard of like gender queer people, right? So queer can be like this umbrella term for people who have a sexuality or a gender identity that doesn't fall in that kind of normalized in society range. Questioning, so that can be anybody, you know, questioning their gender or their sexuality. Intersex is about gender. It's about the gender that you're assigned at birth. It's about, you know, your body. And sometimes people refer to that as like sex characteristics. But your biological gender characteristics has to do with intersex. And we'll go really deep into that. And then non-binary. And then these ones have to do with sexuality. So another one on here is asexual. We won't be going super in depth into asexual today. There's a lot you can go into talking about the ace communities, I should say, but it's important to differentiate, right? Sexuality is different from gender. You can have people who identify as trans and straight. So guess what? We have straight people in our community. You can have people who, you know, identify as a lesbian and they're non-binary. So like you can have all these different variations, but they're two separate things and one does not necessitate the other, right? Just because you're gay, it doesn't mean then you're suddenly, you know, a trans woman or something, right? Okay, so why do we even care? Why are we even talking about LGBTQ people? Didn't they get gay marriage in 2015? Over and done, we're good. It's over, everything's fine. Queer people have their rights. A lot of you are laughing your asses off, and you are correct to laugh your asses off because that's not right, right? It's just straight up wrong. Why do we care? Because there are still many states that do not have many protections and laws for LGBTQ people. This is like I see you guys looking very closely at the screen. This is from Movement Advancement Project that does an assessment of all the laws across the country. This is looking specifically at non-discrimination policy in housing, and it shows all of the tan that you see is where there is no explicit prohibitions for discrimination against people because of their sexual orientation or their gender identity. Florida has a little bit of like mixed reviews there because it seems they include sexual orientation and gender identity only in certain cases and in certain counties, really. That's why it's like that. So it's by county in Florida. But the green ones, those are the ones that actually do have protection. So what that means is that only if you go to those green states are you like guaranteed that like if someone says, no, I'm not going to rent you this apartment because I just saw you walk in with your wife and you identify as a woman and that means you're gay, that you can actually take legal action and probably win because there's a law that's protecting that. But in the tan areas, you have nothing to stand on. And that is something that would maybe have to go, you know, all the way up in the courts, and then the law might change as a result of you taking it there, but there is nothing that currently exists to protect you. And this is the case for a lot of different laws across the country. This is just an example of housing, but there's healthcare protections that aren't there for people. There's, you know, there's an endless kind of list of things. And the Movement Advancement Project actually did an assessment of that for Florida specifically and every other state, but I wanted to show you Florida, and Florida ranks pretty low. They have one more policy that's in place for sexual orientation, one less for gender identity. That's typically the case across the country. You see less protections for gender identity, more for sexual orientation. So trans people are really in this moment fighting for rights, you know, even rights at a level of, you know, folks who are gay or bisexual or pansexual. But this is pretty low, right? In Florida, there's not a lot of protections for folks here. And so when you think about that, you think about your peers who identify as LGBTQ and they're going out and to get jobs in you know, Florida and whatever. Like that's why you see people sometimes move to a different state because they're going to be supported maybe somewhere else they go. And doesn't that suck, right? It limits their ability to be in a certain place and to exist in that place and knowing that they're going to be supported. So this is why we're talking about, this is why it's important. And this is why we learn about the LGBTQ population and how to support them, affirm who they are, and advocate for their rights in anything and everything we do. You know, the more people we have doing that, the more opportunity LGBTQ people will have that's equal to the rest of people in the world. Why do we have these laws in place right now? Why is it still so limited for LGBTQ people? Because of heterosexism. What's heterosexism? Heterosexism is an ideology. So you could say, okay, heterosexism is like calling somebody, oh, you're gay or whatever, like, kind of. That's more like a microaggression. But an ideology is a little different. An ideology is like a system, right? It's like a system. It's kind of like racism. It's a system of attitudes, beliefs, values that form the basis of all social, economic, and political theories and policies in a society. So what is heterosexism? It's a discriminatory ideology that favors and normalizes opposite gender attraction and relationships over same gender attraction and relationships. So you're favoring and normalizing straight people, right? And those types of relationships over gay people and those types of relationships. Little different for monosexism. This is specifically referring to bisexual and pansexual people, another kind of ideology. This is a discriminatory ideology that favors and normalizes sexual and romantic attraction to one gender over sexual and romantic attraction to more than one gender. So bisexual and pansexual people are often attracted to multiple genders, whereas gay people are attracted just to the same gender, or straight people are attracted just to one other gender, usually like called the opposite gender, but we know there's many more genders than just two. So, and that plays into cisgenderism, another discriminatory ideology. This one favors and normalizes the external designation of people's genders and bodies over people's own designation of their genders and bodies. Whoa, what is that? That's like a really wild definition. What this is saying is that we favor when a doctor, for example, says, that baby is a boy, right? We favor that designation over that boy growing up and then being like, I'm a girl, and she wants she, her, hers pronouns, and we don't believe her because the doctor said that was a boy, right? So we favor other people's designations of people's own gender and bodies, and we don't believe them when they say what their own gender and body is, right? So this predominantly impacts trans people and also intersex people, and we're going to go very in depth into that in a little bit later. But I want to give you some, other, support and information on how you can show support for undoing these kinds of isms in your everyday support for LGBTQ people. So affirmation, you might have heard of this word before. It really just has to do with any kind of moment or instance. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Any kind of moment or instance in which an aspect of a person's identity is reflected back to them in a way that is interpreted as supportive, right? So basically anything that you do that another person could be like, aha, you get me, you see me, right? So we have the Safe Zone Advocate program for faculty and staff at FIU. The faculty and staff get a sticker. They can put it on their email addresses. They can put it on their office doors. And it just signals to people in the LGBTQ community that, okay, like you've taken steps to get who I am. Like you're someone that I can go to for support. And so that's a kind of affirmation of like, oh, that's so cool that like FIU even has a program like that. Like I feel like they actually care about me. So just that can signal it. We now have a chosen name or chosen first name policy at FIU. Just the fact that FIU put in the effort to create that policy for a lot of our trans students to be able to say like, this is the first name that I'd like for you to use for me, signals, that kind of affirmation and support for who they are. So it can be something as simple as putting a little rainbow flag on your backpack while you walk around campus. And it can be performative, right? You still got to do other things behind just wearing that flag as a real advocate. But it is really, that visibility is really important in our community, especially because our identities are invisible a lot of times. And when we have other people, kind of put themselves at risk and show that rainbow and show that support, it makes us feel seen in a way that we aren't in other areas of life. And so visibility is really important. We have National Coming Out Day every year on October 11th. Some people find this a little bit pressuring to come out on that day. So, this is usually something that is a place where people can find community and at least see other people coming out and feel encouraged, like, okay, maybe I can do that one day. So we hold a coming out day celebration through our office every year. This year, our Pride Student Union held that celebration over our Instagram. So it was really cool. We had a lot of people submit stories and talk live on our Instagram. So why do we think that people come out? This is where we're gonna get back into a little bit of interaction. I would like people to write in the chat, come on mic. Why do people come out? Why do you think they do? What are some reasons?
I would say people find a way of releasing the oppression of their sexual orientation for many, many years. And they're in either a safe space or safe place in their life to where they can come out, or sometimes people are forced to come out because of their careers or because of blackmail. And because of my time in the military, I've saw a lot of that happen.
Right. Sometimes people come out because they didn't even want to, because somebody else outed them. That's really, really dangerous. We'll talk about that a little more in a second. But yeah, it can be just like that moment where they do feel safe and like it's something that they can do. But why would they do it? Why would they do it at all? Right? Even if they feel safe, why would someone come out at all? What's the point?
To live your truest life and to be able to be yourself and let other people know and let the other gays know.
Right. You might want to find your community. You want to be your truest self. All totally valid and real reasons why people come out. And there's many reasons, right? And they're all probably as individual as there are individuals in the world who come out. Why are some people afraid to come out? What would be some reasons?
Hatred, people like having crappy responses or thinking differently of you or not having, what is the word? Oh my goodness. Like families that support you, supportive families. Yeah, that sucks.
Yeah, fearing that reaction that, you know, may actually result in friendships lost, family support lost. You know, even just having to go through that negative experience of having, you know, you've just come into who you are, you're ready to tell people, and then people are basically trying to like put you right down back in your place. And that can be really hard. But speaking about, in particular, about the risk factor for coming out, it's very real. Like people don't, I think, realize that it is this very scary thing. And the fact that like LGBTQ people have to come out at all is pretty ridiculous, right? Like, why can't we just accept that everybody might have like, no, because heterosexism, right? We make assumptions that everybody's straight. So that's why LGBTQ people have to come out. And then we have statistics like this that are super unfortunate. So LGBTQ youth are 120% more likely to experience homelessness. And that is a very real statistic that LGBTQ youth, trust me, they know that this statistic exists. They feel, you know, what their parents might be saying around the house or whatever, and they are very fearful that this could happen to them, that they could get kicked out. And I'll tell you right now, you know, last year when I first came to FIU, you know, in my first few weeks at FIU, you know, I had at least 4 students come through my office who were terrified of their families kicking them out, and they were in a very toxic situation at home, where I was really trying to find them on-campus housing so that they could avoid that situation. I did have a couple of students who were outed and faced really toxic situations at home, and one student in particular who we had to find housing for because they were kicked out. So this is not made up, right? This is a reality, a real fear that, you know, exists for people, and understand that, you know, about your fellow LGBTQ peers, and, you know, in the things that you do and how you move through life, you know, this is a reality for people in our community. Why do people end up homeless? These are some of the data on that. The biggest one being that they were forced out, you know, or they ran away from a very toxic situation. There's other reasons too, you know, abuse at the home, in the home. A lot of LGBTQ youth age out of foster care because people don't want them, right? They're old, maybe because they're older, but also maybe because they're LGBTQ. Here's an example of a student who responded to the transgender survey in 2015, who explained that within an hour of coming out to their parents, they said, "I was kicked out into the cold with very few items and my car taken away. I was soon informed by my college that my parents had withdrawn my tuition for the upcoming spring semester. I was devastated." And this is, you know, a real person that's happened to them. And this is what's happening, you know, to some of our LGBTQ fellow students, right? So what can you do to better support them around you? In particular for coming out, understand that coming out, you know, is a process. You don't want to out people. That is like a big, big no. Coming out is this kind of process because it really has to do with a person coming into who they are, figuring out that piece of who they are, and then when they're ready on their terms, they come out. So this is a time when people accept or identify with their own gender identity or sexual orientation, and when they're willingly ready to share that with others. So, you know, saying even like, oh, I knew you were gay, right? Can be a little like invalidating because it's like, oh, like they weren't ready yet, right? And like now they feel like there was something about, you know, their behavior maybe before that indicated something like that you knew before they did. And like, that's, you know, it's kind of not affirming, right? It doesn't really support them very well. So understand it's a process. It's not a one-time thing either. It's usually a series of decisions that people make as they navigate new and different settings. So a person may be out, you know, at home with their families who do support them, but they might not be out to their employer, just as an example, because they might not be, you know, in a work environment that's going to support them. This guide is up on our website. I encourage you to download it. It's at lgbt.fiu.edu under resources. But I want you to pay attention to this part on the bottom. If someone comes out to you, there's some do's and don'ts. Don't say I always knew or downplay them sharing that information with you. Don't go telling everyone and bragging about your new trans friend. That's a form of outing, right? You want to ask them, okay, like how private is this? How confidential is this information? Who can I tell? Who can I talk to about it? Who can I talk to about it? Always err on the side of they're trusting you, and that's a wonderful thing. But that this is private information until you otherwise, you know, find out from them directly. So don't ask probing questions, right? Your trans friend comes out to you, don't ask them if they've had surgery. You wouldn't ask your grandma if they had genital surgery or something, right? So don't ask your friend. That's not an appropriate question. You know, I sometimes use the analogy here, you know, if you wouldn't ask someone if they have a circumcised penis or not, you wouldn't ask them if they had, you know, have been medically transitioned or not. Don't assume why they came out to you. Don't assume that they came out to you because they want to date you or something like that. That's not necessarily what's happening, right? They're coming out to you for maybe a myriad of reasons, and don't make assumptions about that. So it's a sign of huge trust. Check in about confidentiality. Remember that this is just one part of them, right? This is one part of them. It doesn't change who they were before to now. You can show interest in this part of them. That's like nice. Sometimes they're still processing through it. And if you're friends, you can ask them like, oh, that's so cool. Like, how did you come to like figure that out? Like, what are you feeling about it right now? You can be curious about it. And then just ask them how to best support them right now. That's a really great question to ask anybody who's going through something new or something challenging. Is just ask like, how can I best support you? If someone's questioning who they are, if they haven't like come out as like a specific identity, but you know that they're kind of questioning or confused, or like not confused, curious about who they are, but they are, just understand that they are not confused is what I wanted to say. You know, confusion indicates that like we don't know who we are, and just because they're questioning doesn't mean you don't know who you are, it just means you're trying to figure that out. And it might be that you don't actually come to a specific identity. Like for myself, I figured out that I'm fluid, right? I don't have a particular identity, and I'm not confused about who I am. I know exactly who I am. It just doesn't have a particular label. So coming out is a personal decision, and you just want to check in with them, like on where they're at, and just be as supportive as you can in that process. You can check in with them about language or the identity that they're using for themselves right now, if they are using any at all. And then always, you know, you have the option to direct them to any kind of support on campus. And that starts with our office. So our office can direct them anywhere. So please do that. But you can also, you know, recommend them to different offices on campus that are supportive to our community. So Panthers Care is one, that's like the Dean of Students office. Counseling and psychological services. We have a victim empowerment program. We have a couple of other good resources. So on our website is a gender inclusive bathrooms list of inclusive bathrooms on campus. We also have our chosen first name policy. So if they are going through that process of thinking about what name they want to use for themselves, that's a great resource for them. And we have lots of student organizations and Miami organizations you can refer them to. But if you don't want to go that deep yet, you can always just refer to our office and you're good to go there. We have an inclusive language guide that we've created out of our office. Go to fau.edu/inclusive language. I encourage you to go to that to learn more about language. We're not going to go super in depth into that because I have a lot more to share with you today. But that is a really great guide that includes the intersections of our community too. So not just gender and sexuality language, but also race language that you don't want to use, students with disabilities, what kind of language that you want to use to be more appropriate there. So what we like to say is that it's not about being politically correct. It's about being accurate and inclusive. Like that's what this is. There's nothing political about who we are. Other people make us political, right? And the language that we want to be used is just what's more accurate and what's going to signal inclusivity and that you're affirming who we are and that you see who we are. When in doubt, center people's own language, right? When you aren't sure, ask people what language they want you to use for them and just use that language because everybody has different language. We have people in our community who do not identify with the LGBTQ acronym, right? That doesn't sit well with them because it's not, I see Travis raising your hand there. Yeah, because it's the LGBTQ language itself has a history of being very gay and white. So a lot of Black folks in the LGBTQ community do not identify with that acronym and prefer, like Travis, like same gender loving, right? So there's different language that people use and you want to find out what they use and try to use that when you can, when they've vocalized that to you. Okay, we're going to go into talking about gender pronouns because this one people always want to have more information about and seem to have the most questions about. But I just want to quickly check in. I just gave y'all a lot of information. How we doing? Do we have any questions? Get in right in the chat or come on mic. Up to you. You feeling good?
Good.
We got any questions? I can't always read the chat, so if there's any questions popping up there.
Yep, none so far. Everyone says good.
Wonderful. Okay, so for this section, this is also going to be about building awareness and a little bit of an encouragement for you all to put forth a little bit of effort in your everyday interactions to try to use the language that people want you to use for them. So this is about affirming people in their own gender identities and bodies, right? Their own designation of that. That's how you counter cisgenderism. Is you're using their own designation of who they are, not what somebody else says they are, or even what you think they are initially, because we all make assumptions. And it's about celebrating the diversity of everybody and their gender. So literally everybody in this room, we got 20 people in this room, there's 20 different ways of doing gender. While there may be some overlap in people's gender identities in this room, right? The way you express your gender, the way you think about your gender, and maybe you don't even think about your gender, it's just subconscious, but you're still making gender decisions throughout the day, like how to wear your hair and what shoes to buy. All those are gender decisions. Everybody has different tastes and ways of expressing themselves, and that's beautiful, right? It's beautiful diversity. So it's about celebrating that too. We're going to do a quick activity. So I'm going to have you all open up the chat box. I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I'm going to show you an image on the screen. You're going to look at this image. Remember I said that this is about awareness. You're going to look at the image and you're going to describe the image, whatever comes to mind. If you were going to be describing this image to somebody who couldn't see it on the screen and they would have to reproduce it, what description would you have to give? And just as a little disclaimer, I told you that we're going to be, there's going to be some things that are going to make you feel uncomfortable in this presentation. I am going to be, for this part of the presentation, showing you images of bodies and possibly drawings of genitalia and things like that. Because when you talk about gender, sometimes that's what it gets down to. It gets down to the nitty gritty. So that's a little bit of what goes into this image activity as well. So again, 30 seconds, have that chat box open. I'm going to pull up my little timer here. I'll give you a 5-second countdown. Get ready and describe the image in the chat box. 30 seconds. Are people typing things in the chat box? I can't see it, so I hope you are. All right, 30 seconds is up. I know it's fast, right? All right, we're gonna do it again. We're gonna have 30 more seconds. Can somebody read for me a couple of the things that are in the chat that people wrote?
Yeah, I can read.
Just like a couple of things.
Yeah. One person said queen mother, love, caring, mother, nurturing.
Perfect.
Baby.
Okay.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you. So I just wanted that to be like vocalized so everybody could hear the words that were being used for that photo. So now we're going to do another one. I'm going to give you a 5-second countdown again. But same thing, 30 seconds. You're going to write in the chat a description of what you see. So 5-second countdown and 30 seconds. Go. Okay, 5 more seconds. And you're done. All right. What's in the chat box now, Janine? Thank you for reading it off.
Yeah, of course. Fathers, male breastfeeding, and trans maybe, somebody said.
Got it. Okay, so here's the 2 images again, side by side. So I put them side by side like this because I did pull up the photo on the left for this activity as kind of like a comparative photo for the painting on the right. So the photo on the left comes from a blog that was specifically about trying to show more depictions of women breastfeeding, because we don't often see positive images of women breastfeeding, and in particular Black women breastfeeding that aren't in like National Geographic or something really dehumanizing like that. So this particular blog poster was like, I want to show more, and we should have more of these kinds of images of people breastfeeding in society. The painting on the right is like, comparative painting. And there's oftentimes people who, look at this photo, they respond with hesitation, right? With great hesitation. And maybe even, what's another word maybe for how you were feeling, for like the emotion that you felt when you saw this painting? Anybody? You're not wrong. It's just how you felt.
Like taken back for a second?
Yeah, like taken back. What else? I often get the word like confused, right? People are a little confused by this. Maybe there's like a little hesitation in how you describe the image.
At first I thought it maybe was satire because I'm looking at the breast and it's in the wrong area, according to the painting. So I know, for the sake of it, so I'm like, maybe a male breastfeeding or some type of activity.
Yeah, sometimes people do recognize the kind of off-centeredness of the breast, but the purpose of this painting, and this painting is actually of a real person in history. So this painting is a 1631 painting by Spanish painter Giuseppe de Ribera, and it is a painting of Magdalena Ventura in the foreground with her husband standing behind her in the background. In this painting, she's about 52 years old. But when she was about 37 years old, she had already given birth to several children in her lifetime. And when she turned 37, she grew a beard and she kept it. And she started to gain a little bit of notoriety for it. If you heard of kind of like the traveling circus acts of the time, like the bearded woman, right? This painting was done, it was at the request of a duke of her and several other people that were in traveling circus acts of the time. So not a very kind of a dehumanizing, way to be uplifted in society, but she did receive some notoriety back then because of her beard. And the painter wanted to show her with a baby in the photo to show that without a doubt, right, she has breasts, she is a woman and she has a baby, right, and that she's given birth before in her lifetime. She probably wasn't actually pictured like posing with a baby for this, but he put a baby into the photo. So yeah, that's her. And she has like very masculine features and all of that. And the reason why I showed this photo and we do this activity, there's a purpose, right? It's to observe how we all hold gender binary assumptions within us about body parts, hair, clothing, everything, right? Like we lob certain gendered aspects to the beard, right? We say a beard is for a man, right? Breastfeeding is for a woman. And when those two things are combined together, when our observations don't fit that binary, we often feel stumped. We feel confused. We feel hesitant. We feel taken aback. When gender, this is also about gender being a spectrum, right? Even within, she identifies as a woman. She was assigned as a woman at birth, most likely. And she identifies as a woman throughout her life. She was able to give birth to children and all of that we associate with cisgender women. And yet this is also part of her presentation, right? This is also part of her body and her lived experience as a woman. And so there is a spectrum of what gender can look like. And this is also about how everyone can experience the negative effects of cisgenderism, right? So it's not just trans people and intersex people and non-binary people that might experience cisgenderism. It's also people who can be perceived. Someone said it in the chat, right? That maybe this is a trans person. No, this is actually a cisgender woman. And she would have experienced some of the similar kind of criticisms that trans people get. So there is a spectrum here, and it's important to think about, like, where in your life has someone told you to fit into your gender box in a way that maybe didn't sit well with you? So like if you're a male, maybe you've been told that you can't cry, right? So you're man up, right? If you're a woman, maybe you've taught to be more ladylike. Everybody has a stake in this experience of what it's like to live in a gender binary and what it's like to be pushed into a box. And that's kind of what we're going with here. So when we think about cisgenderism, it's about the assumptions that we're making about other people and about the boxes we're pushing people into. So you've probably heard this phrase before. I see some of you laughing at the screen. When you assume, you make an ass out of you and me. Yeah, it's uncomfortable when you when you say sir and then the person turns around and you're like, shit, ma'am, right? That's misgendering. You're misgendering somebody. And it happens to cisgender people all the time. But when it happens to trans people, it's particularly, hurtful and harmful because it's something that they live with every day, trying to fight for the recognition of who they know they are. Misgendering is a symptom of cisgenderism. It's when people incorrectly categorize someone as a gender that they don't identify with. It's those oopsies moments, right? But those oopsie moments can be very harsh and very harmful. What we try to do, and this is what we recommend, is to try to use gender neutral pronouns when you don't know for sure the gender of a person. So they, them, their are great pronouns to use when you haven't had the opportunity to share what your pronouns are and then ask a person what their pronouns are. If you don't know their pronouns, just use they, them, their. I don't care what they look like, right? It doesn't matter. Let's go back to Magdalena's photo. I don't care what they look like. Use they, them, their because you don't know until you can ask. So they, them, their is affirmed by the Merriam-Webster dictionary last year as a gender neutral pronoun that we use anyway. We use it when we don't know the gender of somebody. It's very natural for us to do that, to drop a they when we're like, I don't know, the name wasn't very gendered, right? They were Sam on their email address and we don't know if it was Samuel or Samantha, so we say they, and that's what we default to all the time. It's also used specifically when referring to people who are non-binary, and that's what Merriam-Webster added. But we can use it in the singular use. Oh my gosh, I'm telling you what English teachers probably hate me saying all the time, but please use they, them, their as singular use as much as possible. So this is the history of pronouns. It's not new that we are changing the way we use our language and the way we use pronouns in language. So way back when, there were a lot more male pronouns being used to female pronouns. We used to say he, oh, well, when we say, all men are created equal or whatever, we're saying women too. It's the same thing, right? Like we used he to represent everybody way back then. And then second wave feminist movement hit and we were advocating for equal, workplace recognition and all that, but also for recognition in language and in writing. So we see this increase over time. This is a study that did an analysis of pronouns in writing and found that even by 2005, we weren't even balanced. It was every 2 male pronouns to every 1 pronoun. So we're sort of getting there, but we've been doing this like weird she or he thing in our grammatical writing for, all these years since the second wave feminist movement. trying to like be inclusive of women and say she and he in a sentence. But now we're saying, nope, they, them. It's easier to write it anyway. And you can use it in the singular use. Here's what some other pronouns look like. You've probably heard of she, he, and they before. Some other ones like these or zers, who, hums. There's lots of other ones that come actually from the history of language. They exist in the history of our language. They just might not have been popularized. So a lot of folks in the community will go to history and look at language to find pronouns that fit how they actually identify and see themselves. And although they're uncommon to us, when we use them, we're showing respect for that person and validating their identity. Aubrey, you have a question?
Yes, the Z one. I feel like
Mhm.
I saw that for the first time the other day. What, I mean, that's just like, is it just supposed
So these are zers. It's exactly lobs on the same way she, her, hers does, right? You would use it in the sentence in the same way that you would use she, her, hers. But these or zers actually comes from, I believe, from UK English.
Okay.
History, it's found there. So I do know that some of our students use these or zers pronouns, and you would just say like Z went to the store to pick up milk for Zer parent or something, you know, like whatever. Like, so you would, that's how you would say it in a sentence. Same thing, like if the person says, no, just use my name, like avoid pronouns altogether, I don't need the pronouns. You would say like Alex went to the store and Alex bought milk, right? You just say their name.
And is it just like another form of they, them, theirs?
I think you have to ask the person, right? In general, it's more like maybe a bit more of like a non-binary identity, but not always, you know. Some people are, you know, very much like, nope, I'm on like the masculine spectrum for sure. I'm like on that side, but I prefer Z's or Zers or something, right? Just an example. But you have to ask, right? Like people have their own interpretation and understanding of themselves. And sometimes like we have all these labels and these like pronouns and things, and they're great, but they also formulate, like around them formulates like a stereotype, and you still have to ask the person because it's so individualized, right? A label doesn't tell you everything about a person. It's just a label. So you really have to get that description and that understanding if you're curious and if they're willing to share that about themselves. Otherwise, just take it at face value and use the language the person uses for themselves, because that's going to demonstrate to them that you affirm who they are and that they're in a space where they can like bravely be who they are and feel comfortable and like shed. I mean, a lot of folks in our community, right? They like walk around with this like I'm going to get attacked, right? And if they're in a space where they could actually shed that and let their shoulders relax, like that's what you're providing in that situation. Okay, I'm going to use the Flying Gender Unicorn now, which is a tool to talk a little more in depth about gender. There's a lot of different layers to gender, and what we're all taught is there's penises and vaginas and that's it, right? Like so simple. Humans really like simplicity, but gender is just so much more complex, and that's what this tool is going to help us kind of work through. Not all of it may sink in, but what I want you all to walk away with is that gender is a spectrum. It's something that's not always fixed, and when it comes even to our bodies, you know, it's not just about penises and vaginas. There's so many layers to what makes up our biological gender. And you might have heard like sex used for biological gender before. I like to use gender. So here we go. So we have these three kind of like main areas that you're probably most like aware of on some level. So we have gender identity, which is how you think about your gender expression, how you express it outwardly to everybody else through your clothes, your hair, your makeup, etc. And then the gender that's assigned to you at birth, or some people say sex assigned to you at birth. So this is what a doctor tells you even before birth sometimes, you know, in an ultrasound, they'll say to the parents, oh, it's going to be a boy or it's going to be a girl. They're not always correct. And sometimes it's not just female or male, but intersex is another category that we don't always talk about. That's that I and what we went over earlier. So I'm going to break this down a little bit for you using some of the terminology that we use in the community, and also attach that to some of the pronouns that are used. So we have cisgender. You've heard me use this word already a few times. Cisgender is when a person's gender identity matches the gender that was assigned to them at birth. So this is like a cis woman would be someone who identifies as female or identifies as a woman and was assigned as female at birth. Typically uses she, her, hers pronouns. Again, you still need to ask because she might use like they, them, their. I know a lot of cis women who like they, them, their because it is gender neutral and they kind of like that for themselves. So it's up to you, right? It's up to you as an individual. And so you as an individual have to ask what people want to use. Cis man is someone who is assigned male at birth, identifies as a man, typically uses he, him, his pronouns. Then you have transgender people. These are people who self-designate their gender, right? Rather than identifying what was assigned to them at birth by somebody else. That's that countering cisgenderism, right? So trans people, so trans woman is someone who is assigned as male and identifies as a woman. Typically uses she, her, hers pronouns, but may have some other pronouns that she uses for herself. So you want to ask. Trans man, assigned as female at birth, identifies as a man, typically uses he, him, his. Now, I just want to note a couple things. These are sliding scales, right? So you could be like feeling like I identify as a trans man, but you know what? Like, I have a feminine side of me. Like, I might express myself in a feminine way sometimes, and that's okay, right? There's cis men who sometimes express themselves in feminine ways sometimes, so also valid. You know, it might be that some trans people, you know, their entire lives, they've identified, you know, the way they've identified, right? So a trans man might have said, you know what, I identify as a male. And I've, as far back as I can remember, I've identified as a male. So I don't use trans to identify myself because I'm just a man, right? It's society that uses that label, trans, and going through that medical transition and everything, great. Like that was a trans experience, but their identity may be as a man, so they may not actually identify as trans. So it just depends on the person. Like I've you know, come across people who have identified that way and may fill out this chart in that particular way. So I wanted to point out that example to you. We didn't list all the gender identities here, so there's a blank here, right? That indicates that there are many other gender identities that people can have. So that's the possibility there. Then we have non-binary. So these are people who identify outside the gender binary of male or female. So these are people who are typically assigned as female, as male, or as intersex, right? Could be any of them, but the point is that they identify outside of that binary. And sometimes they're using they, them, theirs pronouns, sometimes either, or sometimes like any kind of variation. Like myself, I use all pronouns and I welcome all pronouns. So it really can be anything. And sometimes I don't identify as non-binary, but as something else like agender or genderqueer. Like there's all kinds of labels. We're not going super in depth into all of those, but this is just like basics, right? All right, I kind of skipped over gender expression because those labels and those identities really have to do with gender identity and like what somebody else said you were at birth or before birth. So we're gonna talk a little bit about gender expression because this has to do with norms in a society and how they change. So the way you express yourself is really gonna depend on these different situations or contexts that you're in. We're gonna start looking at just in our culture, looking back at history. So this is a photo of a former US president. No, it's not Donald Trump. This is 1884. This is 1884. So Donald Trump is old, but he's not that old. This is when this former US president was 2.5 years old. Which president is this? You have to do like history, a little history. Who was this? 1884, 2.5 years old. Any guesses? Is anybody guessing in the chat? I can't see. No? No guesses.
I think it's Lincoln, but I think I'm wrong.
1884. It's a little later after Lincoln's time. But 1884, this was FDR, Franklin Delano.
Oh, okay.
I mean, it's just like mind-blowing that this was anybody who was a former US president, right? If we do have a female president sometime in the future, I'm not going to be able to be as effective in this slide presentation maybe, but they would be also very old. So, so this is Franklin Delano Roosevelt. And the reason why I show this is to demonstrate that gender norms change even within a culture across time. You know, it was very, very typical for all babies, you know, before the 1900s, even around the early 1900s, for all babies to be dressed in white gowns, no matter what gender they were. And the reason for that was practical, because typically, you know, domestic wives, you know, at home, that was like traditional, right? They would be taking care of the babies, and that was the most accessible way to get to the diaper, was through with a gown, right? It was annoying to have to go through pants and all of that. And they didn't have the fancy laundry products that we have now. So there was no pink and blue, it was just white because they bleached everything. So that's why. And you see with the hat and the, you know, the hair and the shoes and everything on FDR here, because he was a rich ass white child. That's all it is. Like, he was a rich ass white child. So they used to dress them up like this for photos to be like, look how rich my child is. That's what this was. But this was really typical. And they used to kind of like laugh about it. Like, oh, haha, look at like our child is looking like basically a bald old man, and we can just dress them up looking like anything. But the long hair, they started to cut that shorter. They started to dress boys, you know, earlier and earlier in pants because they were scared that boys were turning gay. That's literally what happened. So it got younger and younger that they started dressing boys in these very specific clothing. And then there was a whole color thing that happened with pink and blue. Blue used to be a color for girls because of Virgin Mary, and pink used to be for boys because it was shade of red and the color of war. So it's just, it changes over time, right? Even within a culture. So we're just in another moment now. We're like, hey, we got pants, women wear pants, and like, I don't know, I hope men can wear dresses one day because it's freeing. Then we have gender cross-culturally. This is looking at today. This is a snapshot of a map of the world. All the markers on this map are different cultures around the world that have some kind of gender that falls outside the binary. And oftentimes is a gender that is highly revered and supported in that society. You're looking at the United States. I just want to draw your attention there if you're not looking there. The markers on the United States are mostly our indigenous and native peoples in the United States who have two-spirit people. Two-spirit is a umbrella term that we've given, but a lot of the tribes have their own names, specific tribal names for their particular two-spirit people. But these are people who perform a very important role in their society that is often taking on the traditions of both men and women and the roles of both men and women in that society. And sometimes are like a very specialized role where they're like conducting very special ceremonies, and it's an important part. And of course, through colonization and, you know, religion coming from overseas, that was we tried to wipe that out, right? White folks tried to wipe that out coming here. But they are still fighting for that legitimacy, you know, and that recognition in the United States that two-spirit people, you know, are here and they're important to those cultures. Okay, I'm gonna pause just for a second before I go into that photo. How we doing? So this is good. We got the history, we got the cross-cultural stuff. All right. So when we're talking about gender expression, we also need to think about, all right, who is this person and what other aspects of their identity are coming into play here? So I'm gonna show you this photo. This photo is of a student at Ohio State University. It was posted to reddit.com in the funny section of Reddit with the title, "I don't know what to conclude from this." And, you know, a lot of people commented under this photo, you know, said, oh, this must be a trans person. Oh, like, what is this person? Like, really kind of some terrible things were said. One of the friends of the person in the photo told the person in the photo, hey, your photo's up on Reddit. And they decided, oh, cool, I'm gonna go and comment on my own photo that somebody posted of me. So this is what the person in the photo actually said. Yes, I'm a baptized Sikh woman with facial hair. Yes, I realize that my gender is often confused and I look different than most women. However, baptized Sikhs believe in the sacredness of this body. It's a gift that has been given to us by the divine being, which is genderless actually, and must keep it intact as submission to the divine will. So this is Balpreet Kaur in 2012. She was a student at Ohio State University. She is a cisgender woman, so she identifies as a woman. She was assigned as a woman at birth. And she has a beard. She grew a beard, much like Magdalena Ventura. Okay, later in life, she grew a beard. And because of her religion, Sikh religion, the point of Sikh religion is to really focus on your religious and your spiritual path and your giving outwardly to the world, and to not change what nature gave you from your body, right? That would be a distraction from your spiritual path in the Sikh religion. So this is a point on intersectionality, the intersection of a person's gender identity, their gender biology, right? Their experience of their gender and their body, and also their religious identity. And for Balpreet, her religious identity really dictates that she can't do anything for her body. And so this is how she outwardly presents herself to the world, even though she identifies as a cisgender woman. When we're talking about intersectionality and this topic, it's just important to note that people are able to sometimes look on the binary because they have the resources to do so. So on the right, does anybody know who that photo is on the right there?
Chaz Bono.
That's Chaz Bono, that's Cher's son. Anybody know who is on the left? Maybe somebody different.
Janet Mock.
Hey, yes, that is Janet Mock. So Janet Mock's a activist, trans woman activist, producer of the show Pose on FX, if you've ever seen Pose. She's an author, speaker. She's really great. I saw her speak once. She's amazing. But the point of showing you this is that, you know, Janet Mock and Chaz Bono are able to look this way because they had the resources and the support to look on the binary. And so they can pretty much move through the world, you know, being assumed to be cisgender, right? They're cis assuming. We sometimes say passing in our community, they pass, but that word kind of has some derogatory connection now because it's like there's this pressure to pass in the community, So we say they're cis assuming. People assume they're cisgender. And the reason why is because this intersection of like class or access to resources or support, family support, and those things, and not everybody has that. So a person may tell you, hey, I'm a trans woman, for example, and you may look at them and go, you don't look like a woman. But that's because they don't have access to the resources to look like Janet Mock can, right? They don't have that right now, and especially when they're in the beginning stages of coming out and going through that transition. But what I also always say here is, even if a person chose to look exactly how they look, but identify how they identify, right? Even if that was at odds with each other in terms of the stereotypes you have about what a woman should look like, do they not deserve rights, equal protections, and also the affirmation of who they are, who they say they are? So I just leave you with that. So we skipped over intersex. I'm gonna go into that. I've got 20 more minutes with you. Intersex is a topic that people often don't really know very much about. So what I do when I go over this topic is I go back to the very basic beginnings of what we learn about how we develop as human beings, because we kind of missed that language and that whole lesson. Somewhere along the way, we missed it. You know, people just said like, oh, there's boys and girls and you just develop in the uterus and done and done. But not really, there's a lot more that goes on. So we're gonna go into that. And so literally we're gonna go back and we're gonna look at some pictures of, you know, drawings of genitals and stuff like that. So get ready. All right, here we go. So this is back to like, just a little bit before the 6th week when we're all developing. This is actually what we all look like. This is like very technical medical terms here. Embryonic undifferentiation of genitalia. You don't need to know that, it's fine. Just understand from this slide that we all look undifferentiated, right? 7th or 8th week, that's when we have what we all think of, okay, like there's the splitting of the genders. You know, we have one, you know, female with vagina and ovaries and all of that. And then what we label as male as penis, testes, all of that. But there's a whole bunch of people that they never split off. They just continue developing the way we all started. And those are people that we call intersex. And this is just really, I'm just focusing on penises and vaginas when I'm talking about this, but there are so many other variations of intersex that have to do with chromosomal variations. We think XXXY are the only variations that we have. Actually not, there's like 14 different variations of chromosomes that contribute to our gender. Here's just some of them. There's a lot of different technical terms here. You don't need to know them. The importance is that people always say, well, how prevalent is this? You know, intersex people are just this like abnormality. It's really uncommon. It's like something that doesn't even really exist. Well, actually, it's an average of 1 in 1,000 births are intersex across all the different variations. But if we're just talking about external genitals, and you know, there's variations in your internal reproductive organs and all that happens too, but we're just talking about external genitalia. Everybody cares about penises and vaginas. If you look all the way down the bottom of the list, that's what that one is referring to. And it's actually 1 in 500. So it's like 1 or 2 in 1,000. So like 1 in 500. And when you're thinking about that, 360,000 babies are born a day across the world. A day, that's like a lot of babies. 360,000 babies are born a day. If we're talking 1 in 500, that's about 720 babies are born a day with external genitals that do not fall on that binary of penis and vagina, right? That's a lot of human beings, 720 that we're pretending like they don't exist. And that we don't think about or acknowledge are a part of our humanity and are a natural phenomenon. And I say natural because, you know, these are medical terms we're using here, but there is nothing medically wrong. There's actually absolutely nothing medically wrong. There's no intervention that needs to happen. We have a genital spectrum in humans. We just pretend that it doesn't exist. We only talk about penises and vaginas. And this is a simplification, right? There's every variation in between these pictures that are up on the screen here. Unfortunately, you know, we go to bodies and we gender them. So when you're born, doctors actually put up a little measuring tool to the penis or the clitoris, and they measure. And if you fall within this 1.5 to 2.5 range, you're considered intersex, right? This is just for external genitals. When that happens, the doctor will often go to the parents and say, hey, let's talk about this. Here's what we recommend. They'll do a chromosomal test to try to determine like, oh, is it XXXY? But we know there's 14 different variations there. So that doesn't always clear things up for people. But oftentimes what they do is they make the baby female. What I mean by that is they actually do cosmetic genital surgery to a newborn baby. There's no laws in the United States that protect against doing this. There are lots of negative outcomes in terms of infection, loss of sensitivity. There's no medical reason for doing this. Most of the time, 99.99% of the time, and even if there was something medically, you know, that needed to happen, it was maybe something with the urethra or whatever, they still didn't need to cosmetically change the genitals to appear female or male, right? Interact is an organization that is advocating for the bodily autonomy of humans, right? To make decisions about cosmetic surgeries on their genitals when they're of age to be able to make those decisions. There's no science that says that you have to get these surgeries when you're young for them to be good and you know, for them, you know, to turn out all right. Making that decision later in life, the surgeries are very good if they want to have those surgeries later in life, but let them make that decision themselves. A lot of intersex people find out later on, and it can be very traumatizing to find out that they have this medical history. Maybe they didn't even identify with the gender they were brought up as, right? And it can be very difficult for intersex people. So this is the intersex flag on the left here. So I encourage you all, you know, fight for intersex rights just as much as you're fighting for all the other letters in the LGBTQ+, because this is a group that really doesn't get a lot of support and attention, and they have zero laws in the United States protecting against the harmful surgeries that are done to them. I don't have time to show you this video, but if you all write this down or take a photo of the screen, there's a TED Talk called Intersex is Awesome between this mom and her intersex child, Ori. And they have this little NBC News video also, Raising the World and an Intersex Child, that's really great. That talks about how Ori has kind of evolved and learned about their body, and their mom decided not to do the surgeries, and how Ori has come into their identity as a result of having that bodily autonomy and having that support from their parents. So I encourage you to watch that at some point. But the whole point of this, you know, is to show you that, you know, there's so much more, right? There's just so many other layers. You know, this is our gender biology over here, right? Like just some of the pieces of it. You know, we didn't even go into hormones. I really only just touched on the chromosomal variations, but there's so much more, and it's so much more complex and more beautiful, right? It's so much more beautiful to understand that complexity than it is just to put people in boxes and say penises and vaginas done. This is why it's so important. You know, this is gender, right? This is gender. And then the Flying Gender Unicorn also has like a sexuality section, so we could go into that for days and days. This is up on our website too. So if you want to like go and download it, and like you could even do this for yourself, but sexuality is also split into physical attraction, emotional attraction, all that. But I wanted to show you this. This is like the penultimate guide for you as allies. So I suggest you take a photo of this. But you know, the whole point of showing you this diversity is just to show you that like we can't make assumptions about people, right? We have no idea what their experiences of their bodies are, their identities. You know, we don't know if their expression is limited because of the resources that they have access to, of the culture that they're in, whatever, you know. So we really need to start asking, start sharing our own experiences as a way of opening that door first, and then asking. So here's the guide. The guide is to always just affirm neutrally to people. So ID cards, people's names, your perceptions are not always reliable. They're not always going to tell you, and maybe, okay, maybe most of the time it's going to be accurate, But to avoid those oopsies and those awkward situations and those harmful situations, you know, if the person didn't tell you what their gender is yet, use they, them, their pronouns when referring to them, or you can gender neutrally use their name if they gave you their name already. Share your pronouns to signal inclusivity. So you want to share your pronouns first. Don't just walk up to someone and say, hey, what are your pronouns? Because they're going to be like, what? Like, what do you mean? I look this way. How do you not know my pronouns? Share your pronouns. Be like, hi, you know, my pronouns are she, her, hers. My name's Erica or whatever, right? I want to know what your pronouns are. I ask everybody this question, by the way, right? If just avoid that awkwardness of like, huh? Like, why are you asking me for my pronouns? Like, oh, I ask everybody. You don't know. You never know what people's pronouns are these days. Don't expect people to share their pronouns because they might not be ready to. You know, they might not be ready to even identify, you know how they exist through the world yet. So if they're, or they might not even like know how to answer it. So don't make people share their pronouns, but give them that opportunity. And of course, never ask about bodies, medication, or surgery. As an advocate, as an ally, you want to research any questions that you have on your own. Ask educators like me. We're going to do that for the next few minutes until 5 o'clock, but you can ask me whatever you want. I'm an educator, like this is what my role is. But just know that like your friends, people come out to you, stuff like that. Not everyone wants to be your teacher, your educator on these topics. There's tons of YouTube videos. You can go on YouTube and look up like lots of really wonderful people in the community are willing to share things about themselves. Go look there. You still have questions and you have a close friend, you know, you can ask them, you can say, you know, I have questions about this. Are you willing to talk about these things? Like, can I ask you some questions about these things? And if they say yes, then you can proceed with caution and ask, right? But just don't dive in and be like, oh, hey, trans friend, tell me all the things. Mistakes happen. You know, I make mistakes. I said this at the beginning, I make mistakes all the time. I misgender people all the time. I've been doing this research and I do these presentations, but it happens, right? The major thing that you want to keep in mind is that, yeah, mistakes happen, but just get over it, right? Don't make it about you. Don't put a guilt trip on the other person, right? Like this is about you making that mistake, not about them now making you feel better for making the mistake. So don't make it about you in that situation. Just apologize and correct yourself real quick. I mean, we do it all the time, even just in regular speech. Like we might be like, oh yeah, she was da 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 da, and like it's like, oh, why did I even do that? Like language, you know, mess up. But just simply correct yourself and move on. And then if you're having a really hard time, especially if like repeatedly you're misgendering somebody, try to practice, right? Practice with somebody else. Like go say to your friend, like, hey, I'm gonna talk about my friend who uses users or his pronouns, and I'm gonna talk about them in a sentence, like, or in a paragraph, and just like tell you a story about them. And I want to make sure that you correct me every time I don't say the right pronoun. Practice is what's gonna help you prevent future slip-ups. And that's it. And I would love for you to fill out this evaluation form and let me know how terrible I am or how great I am. No, honestly, we really do look at the feedback, and I really do consider all the feedback and future presentations that I give. And now it's time for questions. So we have a good 7 minutes. It's very open format. I'm going to leave this link up here so y'all can copy that down and do the evaluation form. But ask me questions. What would you like to know?
We have one question in the chat. Can you tell me what the most pressing injustice issue is for the community?
Oh my gosh. All of them. The most pressing. I mean, I'll just tell you, you know, one that I really care about, and that like is on my mind, you know, right now, because of the month that we're in. This month is Transgender Day of Remembrance. Our students have an event coming up on November 20th, which is the annual Transgender Day of Remembrance. And we commemorate the lives that are lost in the trans community every year on that date. We've been doing it since 1999. The reason is because we are disproportionately seeing that trans and mostly trans women of color, mostly Black trans women, are being murdered every year. I think the count is at 33 this year, and that's the known ones, right? So a lot of people in our community are misgendered in the media. a lot of them are not counted. So we know that, you know, just in the United States this year, we had 33 for sure, for certain on record. But there's so many. And like, that is, I mean, it's literally about lives, right? Every day. I mean, that's the most basic thing, right? All the other things are privileged, right? To have housing, to have employment rights, to have marriage. Those are privileges. But just to live, like, that shouldn't be a privilege. Like, that's just the most basic freaking thing. And that's what people in our community are fighting for. And, you know, we make, it seems like pronouns are like this insignificant thing, but it really is about affirming people and like acknowledging who they are, because when they walk down the street, you know, they're not seen that way, and then they're discriminated against and sometimes murdered for it.
Another question is, can you explain fluidity?
Okay, yeah, so I can explain it for myself. So from my experience, it's very much like, I just go with whatever I'm attracted to, right? Like, and there's no rhyme or reason sometimes. Like, I like to say sometimes it's just like a person's aura, and it has nothing to do with gender. But sometimes it has entirely to do with gender, right? It has to do with the way that person presents their gender, and I'm really attracted to the way they do that or something too. So it's very fluid for me, and one day it can be one thing and the next day it can be another, and I don't label myself, mostly because of that, because it's limiting. It's just limiting. And I don't like stereotypes being lobbed onto me. So I'd rather be like, no, I'm not going to give you a label, because then you're going to make all these assumptions. I'm just going to give you a description of what it is for me. So that's what it is for me, right? Fluidity might be different or feel different for somebody else.
Another question is, can you differentiate between pansexual and bisexual?
Beautiful. So that was one that I kind of skipped over, but it's often one that I end up kind of going into. So bisexuality is a term that kind of came about and got like some more recognition like long before pansexuality came out. And so bisexuality, the prefix bi, right, means two, like bicycle, two wheels, bisexual means two. So it's really referring to attraction to two genders, male and female, right, and within that binary. But a lot of folks recognize that, no, my bisexuality it really isn't about gender. It's just about the person. And although they may be identified as bisexual, you know, and that gravitated towards that language, it wasn't really about attraction to two genders. And so pansexuality was a term that people now use to refer to attraction to more than one gender, right? Or sorry, yeah, more than one gender, more than two genders. Yes, thank you. More than two genders, right? The potential to be attracted to, no, it's more than one gender, because it's acknowledging that there's more than one gender, right? It's not saying that there's two, but it's saying that you are attracted to more than just one. Does that make sense? Okay, sorry. So we got pansexuality came a little later as that acknowledgement that there are more genders than just men and women, and that the attraction can be to people who are non-binary on that spectrum, people, you know, who are fluid and all of that, that it's not really about gender for them. And so there's some people that gravitate towards the bisexual identity still, because it's just what fit for them, but it still has a lot of the elements that pansexuality has. So it's really just almost like a preference thing nowadays. It's like, if you like the traditional term versus like the new one. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. And another question is, what are good ways of getting involved with the community, whether that be on campus or off campus?
So lots and lots of ways. We have a Pride Student Union that is forming. They need support because they're trying to become a council like the BSU or the SPC here at FIU. And they just got a resolution passed at the SGA in support of them forming, but they still have a lot of steps to go through. And they're going to need a lot of support to like really get them up and running. I'm sorry, I keep going dark because my computer screen goes off. But they're going to be taking over a lot of the events that we haven't had in the office. So Trans Day of Remembrance is actually being put on by our Pride Student Union students, and they're looking for G board members or general board members to help them put on these events. So if you are really passionate about supporting the community, contributing like literal like time and energy, that's a really great way to get involved on campus, to get involved in some of the student clubs. We have many student clubs, so not just the Pride Student Union, but that is one of the big ones that's coming up. you can come meet with me sometime, and we can talk about what we do and other things that we do in the office that you could contribute to as a volunteer. And then in the community, there's lots of organizations you can volunteer at. There's Pride Lines and Trans Social and Trans Inclusive Group and just a whole number of them. We have them listed on our website. I know they have volunteer opportunities at them, and I can help you get connected. So basically just contact me and I'll let you know more in depth maybe what you're looking for and how you would like to get involved on that level. Aubrey.
Yes, okay. A couple questions. Oh,
Yes.
okay. One, where do we find your guys' socials?
Yes, so that's why I actually closed out just now, because I want to drop my email for you. That's my direct email. And then our handle on like all social media is that. Oh, thank you, Dylan. And then my personal, professional social media is that. So I welcome you all to ask me questions through DM, through email, through whatever. Thanks, Alicia. Thanks for being here. I know we're over 5 o'clock already, but this is the end. So if you have questions, follow me on Instagram. Like, it's fine. I'm okay with that. If you're okay with that, you can DM me and I'll answer anything. I'm an open book and I do this. This is what I do. I'm an educator. So please reach out.
Okay, my other question. What was my other question? Oh, are there a lot of like members of the community at FIU, you know?
So we serve an average of 4,000 students a year. They come to our events, they come to our, all the things that we do. Yeah, so I think we have a lot of, allies in there too, who are maybe straight and cisgender that come to our events. But I mean, honestly, we don't reach enough of the community. We're working really hard to do more outreach, and we've seen a nice uptick in involvement just in this virtual environment, which is really cool. So showing that we are reaching different parts of the community now, but we can do better. So I have a feeling there's more of them out there. But that's about 10% of the FIU student population, 4,000. So yeah, a lot. We are a big community.
That's so exciting.
Mm-hmm. All right. I
have
don't
a
want to keep
question.
anybody longer. Oh yeah. Go ahead, Mitchell.
So let's say I was doing a presentation and I had to call up on the audience, but I didn't know what pronoun they go by. How would I go on that situation?
If you're doing a presentation and you're calling on so-and-so in the back of the room or whatever, right? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
So, I would refer maybe to something that they're wearing, like, oh, hey, you in the red shirt in the back, right? Their location, what they're wearing, something like that. I know that people, honorifics, right? Mr., Mrs., or ma'am, sir, we're often taught that like the polite thing to do is to say sir and ma'am all the time. But we're becoming more and more informal as a society, and I highly recommend that you just avoid saying sir and ma'am. And like if your workplace requires you to do that, I'm just kind of going on a tangent a little bit here because it made me think of it, but you can use mix, MX, for like Mr. or Mrs. MX is actually like the gender neutral honorific now. But really only if a person uses that for themselves. Like, I don't like honorifics at all, except if I use an honorific, it's doctor because it's gender neutral, but I don't want people to actually refer to me as doctor on the regular. So yeah. But yeah, just this article of clothing or where they are, or excuse me, right? If you're trying to get their attention, that's it. Anything else?
I don't see any questions in the chat, but if y'all have any questions, go ahead and put it in the chat or speak up.
Or you can ask me after. Yeah, and I see people have to go. Oh, you do? You have a question? Yay.
Yeah. Any advice on trying to get into like gender studies? Because I was considering doing my interdisciplinary studies, like certificate minor in that.
Yeah, the Center for Women in Gender Studies. They're a very like close friend of our office. I can put you in touch with Jessica Bermudez. So if you just email me, I can give you like the direct contact. I'd have to like look it up right now, but that's her name anyway. She's like the main person in the Center for Women in Gender Studies, and she'll give you all the information you need on how to get connected there.
Okay, cool.
But they're great. They have a new director, Alex, and she's amazing. So you'll be very well taken care of in that program. Anything else? Anybody? I think we're gonna close out so we can respect everybody's time up in here. But yeah, please DM me, send me emails, connect with our office. We have open hours on Fridays from 1 to 3. The link for that is go.fiu.edu/LGBTQA drop-in. So you can drop in and hang out with us from 1 to 2 on Fridays. This week we're doing 1 to 3 because it's like a stressful week and we wanted to create that space for students. So come hang out with us on Fridays. We're there, my whole staff.
Wait, and where did you say that is? That like where we can find that?
I just put in the chat the Go link. Yeah, go.fiu.edu/LGBTQA drop-in. And Dylan will be there this Friday. I might not be, but Dylan's helping us out in the chat there. Thank you.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
every Friday. Oh, you're welcome. Happy to do it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome.
All right. If you all did the evaluation already, thank you so much. And I super appreciate you all for giving me the time. And again, if you have any questions in the future, just let me know. All right.
Thank you.
See you later.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.